Good day everyone, it's me, the basement mage, the mage in the basement, and I'm happy to see you yet again. This video is, well, it's gonna be a video that is about the things I'd like to change within the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC belonging to Elden Ring. Oh, by the way, before I get into it, spoilers! Spoilers! Just know there is spoilers! Okay, everyone who doesn't want to see spoilers are gone? Good! Now, before I begin anything else with the things I have, or the things I want changed within this DLC, I like to preface that this DLC is amazing. I do not hate Shadow of the Erdtree, quite the opposite, I love it. I've been playing this non-stop for the past days and it's been a blast. There's so much to love, and even though there's many things that do annoy me a little bit, I just can't be too mad at FromSoft, and honestly they have done a good job. I feel like people tend to forget that they are trying their best. They are trying to appeal to a giant player base, and they do make some mistakes here and there, and sometimes they just they don't, like, they can't predict everything, right? They can't predict what's gonna happen. So let's just remember that FromSoft is trying their best, and we just have to cut them some slack at least. Though, if in the slim chance that FromSoft ever sees this, which is next to none, I would like to say that, guys, you're amazing. And while these things, these changes, in my opinion, would be lovely to have, I just want to tell you that you've done a good job. So give yourself a high five. But anyways, aside from that, I'd like to just get into what I think is the most important thing that needs to be changed. So before I get into what I think is the most important changes, I would like to just explain what the most important changes really mean. What I mean by this is that these are changes that I personally think need to be done to make the experience better. Well, yeah, there is other things I would like changed. These, in my opinion, would change the experience so much more for me personally, in a way that just makes playing through Shadow of the Tree far more enjoyable than it already is. So, if FromSoft is listening, these changes would probably, in my opinion, be very important. While I might recite these changes, these are all still personal opinion, and heck, I might be wrong in some of the facts I might recite now, so if I am, I'd like to humbly apologize, and hopefully you can just ignore my stupidity, and maybe even point it out in the comments. I would love to see what any of you commenters might say about this. But personally, I think one of the biggest issues in Shadow of the Erdtree, in my personal opinion, is at least the quantity of Scadutree fragments. While I think the Scadutree fragments is absolutely amazing, I love the system, it really adds, you know, the same feeling of progression you have within the base game of Elden Ring. I feel the quantity should be upped a bit. What do I mean by this? What I mean is that for you to hypothetically max out your character when it comes to power through Scadutree fragments and even revered spirit ashes, I think you might need an exact number of 50. And the issue is that there's an exact number of 50 all across the world, which means if you have missed some fragments, you're gonna have to look for them. You're gonna have to look long and hard for every nook and cranny, and this is not easy. Because depending on where the fragment is, it could either be dropped by an enemy, it could be in a very obvious statue of Marika, or it could just be in some random place, like literally in the middle of nowhere, across this giant map that is the Shadow of the Tree. Because, let me preface, Shadow of the Tree is ginormous. It's huge. It is not the size of Limgrave, it is more the size of Limgrave, Caelid, and Liurnia combined. So yeah, I think this is the biggest flaw that Shadow of the Tree has when it comes to these Scadutree fragments. So my proposal to at least fix this issue is just add more. You know, do like you did in Golden Seeds. Add a little more here, maybe add some more into some more dungeons like catacombs and smithing forges to really incentivize and motivate the player to go in and explore more special places. Maybe add more in the world, maybe add a little bit of excess, because at least in the base game of Elden Ring, You needed 30 golden seeds to max out your flask, but there was about 42 of them in the whole world, which made it so much more bearable to max them out. And of course, I don't expect anyone to max out the Scadutree fragment level in their first playthrough, but I shouldn't either have to backtrack and look all across the world, well, to find maybe one fragment that I missed out on. Same thing goes with Reverse Spirit Ashes. And, you know, it would be very nice if FromSoft did this. Especially because I feel like this kind of kills the replayability of the DLC if you need to fight a boss like the final boss of this DLC, who is notoriously hard. Having to find those last fragments could really make a difference. So please, FromSoft, if you be so kind, add more fragments all across the world. This would really help with not having to look through every nook and cranny to, you know, max out to at least level up your character accordingly, please. And if that cannot be done, then please, FromSoft, I do suggest maybe adding an item in the very late into the DLC that might point you to the last remaining Scadutree fragments, maybe hidden behind a hard boss or something like that, to at least make it easier to find those last fragments, because it's not easy trying to find a fragment hidden by a little enemy with a pot on his head or something. It takes a while, you know? This next change is a bit personal, so I just want to say it's all personal opinion. This is not an objective fact. If you disagree, that's completely fine. If you find this next part, you know, valid or invalid, that's completely fine. If you beat this next part and all that by your own little way, that's fine too. Spirit Ashes, Shields, who cares? You did good. And also, I want to say, before I get into it, mega spoilers. This is the final boss of the DLC, and I do not want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. So please, if you haven't beat the final boss, do not continue watching. Do not. Or skip to this part. You good? Good? Yeah. Good. Okay, so you know what? This next most important change, which is a personal opinion of mine, is, as you expected, the hardest boss in the whole series, Consort Radahn. But I believe he's not hard for the reasons you might think. And look, yes, he is incredibly hard, but he's also really fun. He's not a bad boss. FromSoft, if you've seen this, this is an amazing boss. You did a really good job. However, I do feel like one thing should be changed. And it's not the changes you'd think. It's not the health. It's not the damage. It's not the attack windows or the openings. It's not even the moveset. There's nothing wrong with that. I feel like that's not an issue. No. Heck, it's not even the cross-slash attack which everyone is complaining about. Well, to be fair, those complaints are somewhat valid. That attack is very inconsistent. My biggest issue with Consort Radahn is two things. The first thing is the amount of light he produces, because this obscures your vision, and while it doesn't happen very often that you get, you know, when you get blinded by the light. No, it does happen from time to time, and it does feel very sucky fighting this incredibly difficult boss, him doing an attack, and you can't see anything, and then he follows up with a very quick attack which will catch you because you couldn't see it coming. And honestly, I feel like they should just tone down the lights a little bit. But that's not even the biggest issue, in my opinion. The biggest issue is the amount of stun he does with his light. Because in his second phase, with every attack he does a little pillar of light. And those lights tend to be probably the worst part of the boss fight, in my opinion. It's not the damage they do. No. It's the amount of times they stun you. Because, in my opinion, I feel like every time I die to Radahn, it's not because I rolled bad or you did this bad. It's because I'm getting juggled. I get hit by a single pillar, it stuns me or knocks me out for long enough for him to do a secondary attack with more pillars and more attacks, which juggles me into the next attack, and I'll hope and pray that I get either pinpoint perfect dodge enough to dodge out of the juggling, or that he does a slow enough attack that I can actually dodge away. Because in my opinion, I feel like positioning is the biggest problem with the Consort Radahn. And this is his hardest part. if you make a single mistake, you just get juggled and all your health bar disappears. You dodge wrong, you get hit by a pillar, and you get juggled. It's like, it feels like I'm a little shoe toy from a big old dog, and I'm getting thrashed around over and over, and it's not fun. You know, it's kind of frustrating. Like, it basically forces you to pin perfect dodge everything, because if you get hit once, you get punished insanely hard. And honestly, I feel like that's a bit much. Even for me. Like, come on, man. I've one tried Malenia nowadays. I'm not exactly a pushover. And once again, I love this boss fight. I just feel like this part needs to be changed. This is just a bit too much, just getting juggled around. So, FromSoft, if you're hearing this, shorten the stun duration, shorten the knockback, make me be able to roll out of the giant lawnmower that is oncoming, make me be able to at least somewhat roll away from the pain without having to light roll. Please, FromSoft, that would be very kind. I would be eternally grateful. Do not change the damage, do not change the health, do not change the speeds. Because, especially if you're using a big weapon, if you get hit by one single attack, it feels like you're kind of screwed. So FromSoft, would you be so kind to change this? Thank you. Well, that's about it when it comes to most important changes. I guess we can go to the more balance-induced changes. So yeah, let's get into that. So this section is dedicated to at least balance, and specifically balance within weapons. The next one is going to be for balance within spells. So yeah, this is going to go through essentially what is a list of weapons that I think lack something specifically or needs to be changed in some way. So without anything further to do, I think we can just, you know, get straight into it. And for our first weapon, by the way, I'm gonna be testing all my weapons on this guy right here, this Black Blade Kindred, you know, this very late game boss, because I was thinking, well, if I'm gonna max out every weapon's potential, I might as well test on someone who can take it. So yeah, this is the first weapon we're gonna go through, and it's the, well, throwing knives. And personally, I think, especially with a new buff, the throwing knives are pretty nice to use. However, in my personal opinion, I just feel like they just need a little more bump into their damage. Not range, their range is decent. I just feel like their damage needs to be a little more, especially if you compare them to some other weapons. This one falls off very quickly. So if FromSoft would be so kind, I think just adding like a 10 or 15% increase with all this weapon really needs. Otherwise, it's pretty decent. And for our next two weapons, weird enough, it's going to be both the Moonrifil's Greatsword and the Troll Knight's Sword. And both of these weapons, just to preface, aren't terrible. They're not terrible weapons. They do alright or decent damage, you know, they have a nice movesets with their poke heavies. However, I do feel like they're, like, at least with the Moonrifil's new addition, it feels a bit weird to have the old Troll Knight Sword, doesn't it? You know, they both have the same exact damage, they have the same scaling, it's just they are... one of them has a giant phalanx spell while the other just has Troll Sword. Which wouldn't be terrible if Troll Sword didn't already exist as an Asher War and could be probably put on a very... well, a stronger weapon. So, in my opinion, FromSoft, all I want you to do is to go to the old Troll Knight Sword and perhaps change the damage it does to, well, at least the damage of the Troll's Roar on that weapon to magic damage. Perhaps recolor the Troll's Roar, make it blue and make it do magic damage. This would at least add a different niche to this weapon. It would essentially have the Troll's Roar Asher War, or weapon art in this case, but still have a different use by the fact it does magic damage. I think this is all it needs to have, really. It's just change the damage type on the normal Troll Knight Sword, because, in my opinion, this would at least differentiate both Moonrifil's Greatsword and the Troll's Knight Sword, and maybe, if you can, FromSoft, perhaps bump the magic scaling, or at least the scaling on the magic damage for these swords. That would be nice, but otherwise, just change the weapon art of the old Troll Knight Swords. That's all I ask for. And for our next weapon, it's the Fork-tongued Hatchet. Yeah, this weapon, like, its damage isn't the bad part, and its moveset's pretty nice. Its weapon art, however, is... well, it's very underwhelming. It doesn't do much damage at all, it locks you into place, and more often than not, it's just better to swing with the weapon. So, yeah, my suggestion, just bump the damage, first of all, but second of all, add some different use to it, because right now it's just Flame Breath, so maybe make it do a debuff. Perhaps when you hit an enemy with this Four Tongues Hatchet Dragon form Flame, I suppose, maybe you do like 10% more damage to that enemy for 30 seconds, or maybe they do less damage to you. Just anything, man. This weapon needs some kind of use, so maybe making it do a debuff on the weapon art could be a pretty good idea. Well, but our next weapon on the list is the Spirit Glaive and the Spirit Sword, and both these weapons aren't terrible. They're not horrible. But in my opinion, I feel like their weapon arts are very lacking. Once again, good movesets, good normal movesets, but the weapon arts is... they're fine. Like, they essentially have sword dance, but with tiny skulls coming out. And the thing is, this weapon art, for some reason, doesn't do that much damage. The skulls doesn't track very well, and they don't do much damage either. So my suggestion is just maybe bumping up the damage of the skulls a little bit. But perhaps make it do a buff as well. You know how some weapon arts buffs your weapon? Maybe make it buff your weapon with Ghost Flame. That could be pretty cool. Like the Health and Steeple. Oh well. Aside from that, our next weapon is also, well, it's also a halberd. It's the Pole Blade of the Bud weapon. It's Romina's weapon, essentially. And this weapon is pretty cool. He has rock build-up, he has a very nice moveset, it's an arcane weapon, and its weapon art is so beautiful and pretty. The only issue I have with it is that it does miss a lot, and you can get hit out of it. So, in my personal opinion, FromSoft, if you're hearing this, maybe add a very small amount of hyper armor to this. Not too much, just a very small one, and if you're not gonna do that, could you at least make the tracking a little better, you know, because as of right now, in this footage at least, it performs pretty damn good, but most of the time with other enemies, I felt like I missed a lot, or I got hit out of it, so yeah, those two things would be very nice. But for our next weapon, I feel like this, at least this solution it's very simple. Our next weapon we're going to talk about, it's the Bonnie's Butchering Knife, which is the other equivalent of the normal butchering knife, and this weapon is actually pretty nice. I like it a lot. It's more strength oriented. It can buff itself. It's a very nice moveset. You can heal yourself even more with its weapon art. The only issue I have is, for some reason, despite this being a strength weapon, it has a 20 dex requirement. So I just want to make a simple suggestion for FromSoft. Either lower the requirement to 10 dex, or perhaps, in my opinion, just switch them up. So 16 dex, 20 strength. That's all I ask for. Like, it's a very small change, but I feel like making a weapon need 20 dex when it's a strength weapon is kind of ridiculous. Well, but after that, let's talk about our next weapon, which is the Devonia's Hammer. And this weapon is pretty cool. I like it. It kind of reminds me of Leto's Great Hammer, and it has good damage, its weapon art does good damage, but I feel like its only issue is the fact that it's a bit too similar to Ordovis's Greatsword, especially when it's weapon art, and I think most people are going to prefer Ordovis's Greatsword for its speed and the very similar damage it does. And another thing I also found strange, if I'm wrong, just point it out, but I think Ordovis's Greatsword does more poise damage when fully charged, which is kind of sad considering that it takes much longer to charge the Devonia's Hammer. So in my opinion, FromSoft, I just want you to increase the poise damage of Devonia's Hammer to make it on par with the Greatsword, or if more, because of how slow this weapon art is. And if you can, I know this is definitely not gonna happen, but I really wish this hammer got a special heavy, but I know it's not going to, but I kind of wish you had a special heavy of Leto's Great Hammer from DS3, but that's not gonna happen. But still, just increase the poise damage FromSoft to at least make it on par with Ordovis's Greatsword, and maybe even more, so it has a different use. But opposite from Devonia's Hammer, these weapons are very unique, because they are the perfume bottles, and they are cool. They might not do the most damage, but they are really cool. However, I do feel like they might lack in one department or two. It's their damage and range. I feel like both their range and damage is a bit Like, the range is deceptively short. Like, you get surprised on how short it is. But also the damage isn't the highest, so FromSoft, maybe bump this up just a little bit. Not much, just a little. And maybe increase the range by a little bit. Not too much, just a little. That's all when it comes to these weapons. Oh yeah, before we continue talking about DLC weapons, FromSoft, where's the special weapon art on the black blade weapons? Where's the special spinning slash? Where's my Destined Death Great Axe Warcry? Where is it? Where is it? Tell me! Okay, for our next weapon, it's within the fist class, and it's the Golem Fists. They are cool, they are decent. However, they have one very big weakness, and that's their heavy attacks, which, despite being ranged, doesn't have much range. Their damage is fine, but the range is bad. So FromSoft, if you really want to make this fist weapon more on par with the spiked cestus that's being shown right here, please buff the range of the Golem Fists. Heavy attack, just do that. I think they need more range, because right now it's barely anything. So FromSoft, if be so kind, please buff the range of the heavy attacks. Please. This next one, it's the repeating crossbow, and it's very simple. It consumes way too much FP and stamina. So FromSoft, if you be so kind, please buff the reduce the stamina consumption and FP consumption. That's about it. That's what this thing needs. Damage is not necessary. It's supposed to proc status, but not consume this much resources. And this next weapon is what I would say is probably the most personally saddening thing ever. And it's the Death Knight Twin Axes. Look, I love this weapon. The weapon art is really good. But oh my god, the power stance axe moveset is still one of the worst. Which basically proposes my change. It's not the weapon art, it's perfect. FromSoft, the power stance axe moveset has been the weakest moveset when it comes to power stancing for the longest time ever. So please, just speed it up. I know you gained a low buff in like a patch long ago, but it still needs, like, especially when you buff its normal like one-handed, two-handed moveset, buff the power stance moveset. It's still insanely slow and clunky. So either buff the speed or buff the recovery so you can roll out of it at least, because fuck, you might get hit a lot because of it. Jesus. Though while the axes was probably the most personally saddening, these weapons right here is the most personally confusing and disappointing. Look, aside from the promised console weapons doing a little less damage and weapon arts, they're almost carbon copies of the Starskirt's greatswords. And I don't know why. The only difference is that these weapons have a larger dex requirement, which is weird already, but their movesets aren't special at all. And well, their weapon arts are different, yes, but one is obviously better than the other. The Promised Consort version of the, well, Bradan's Promised Consort of Greatswords is so much better than the Lightspeed version, which misses a lot and doesn't do that much damage. And honestly, I don't know why FromSoft separated these. They could have just made a stance weapon art and have both of them, but no, instead they made two different weapons, which just takes more space on the, you know, the remembrance. Like, why didn't they just make these two different greatswords, or just made it into a stance weapon art, you know? And another thing that many people are pointing out is, why have the same moveset? Like, you know, especially with how these look and how thin they are, it would probably have made more sense making them into power stance curved greatswords. That would have made more sense, and honestly, I wouldn't be against that. But my more confusing, at least, thought process, that why split them into two weapons? Just make it into a stance weapon art, because at least in that way you wouldn't have to go to two different mausoleums to not just get the, well, the spell we'll talk about later, but also another version, or potentially worse version, of the Promised Consort weapon. I don't get it why. As here, like, if they just did this, why didn't you just do two different weapons? So you could go from, you know, the promised consort attack and the lightspeed slash and instant. That would be so much more fun, but no. I don't know, but FromSoft, please just combine these. I don't know, I don't get it. Or at least make a curved greatsword. Like, what is this? So, for our next section, it's all gonna be about sorceries and incantations, and I'm gonna go through what I think, if they're good, or if they're bad, and what areas they should be improved upon. Similar to what we just did with weapons. We're gonna start with sorceries, of course, and then we'll go to incantations. But, well, without anything further ado, let's get started with our first sorcery. And the first sorcery we are gonna introduce is Relana's Twin Moons. And just to preface, the sorceries within this DLC are pretty good. They're most balanced, I would say, but some of them still need some working on to do, and this is one of them. While this sorcery does hit really, really hard, my issue with it is that it's also really, really slow, and it can be interrupted really, really easily as well. If you just get hit, well, you get knocked out of it and you can't shoot your moon. It's not like some other spells where you get hit and you can still perform it. If you're hit, that's it. I think. If I'm wrong, just tell me. But it's not just that. The fact that its range or its radius isn't even that large, which is my biggest issue, so you still miss it if you're too far away. So in my personal opinion, I think FromSoftware just needs to add some hyper armor, or just make the AoE larger to make it a better, you know, just a better crowd control spell, because as of right now, well, it doesn't do very much, and it's really slow. Like, I mean very, very slow and very, very easy to get hit out of. As you can see here, it does good damage, it's just, it's slow. That's it. Well, for our next spell, it's the Mantle of Thorns and Mass of Putrescence. And for Mantle of Thorns, I know it's supposed to be somewhat of a joke, but come on, like, at least make it do something. Like, maybe make it build up 5 bleed for each roll. At least, like, it wouldn't be overpowered to the point that you build a ton of bleed, but it would be another way to proc bleed. You know, keep the blood build up faster. But let's also talk about Mass of Putrescence, and this one is, it's just really inconsistent. Sometimes it it hits an enemy, but the projectile, the lingering effect, flies over him. It takes a really long while for it to actually drop on the floor. It's weird, especially if you hit up in the air, it takes a while. I just feel like this spell is just a worse version of Mantle of Haima, or, sorry, the freaking Cannon of Haima. And as you can see, when it does hit, it deals good damage. It can build a frostbite, but actually hitting it is insanely hard. So FromSoftware, just make it explode when you hit an enemy, or at least make the radius larger or make it faster. This is just way too inconsistent for my taste, and it shouldn't be this inconsistent. Like, actually hitting it in the first place is already hard enough because it's a slow projectile, a slow spell, but the fact that he also needs to land on the floor to actually do decent damage is just way too, it's too slow. It's just too slow. So please, FromSoft, make this faster, or at least make the radius larger to compensate, because dear god, hitting this is it's a challenge on its own, let me tell you. But hey, at least the amount of what I would consider rather weak sorceries aren't very large, and honestly, I'd say sorceries are pretty well off in this DLC. I don't think, however, I can say the same thing about incantations. Yes, there are more incantations, but I feel like a lot of them need some adjusting to do. Speaking of which, the two new Crucible incantation, the Thorns and the Bloom, and both of these don't do enough damage, and out of the two, of course, the Bloom is the worst. This thing is so slow, the recovery is bad, and the damage isn't even that high. It's really bad damage. Even though a big enemy doesn't do too much at all. I don't know if it's a bug or if this is intentional, but FromSoftware, come on, for something that's this slow, it should do more. Even if I can hit from long away, it should still be faster, do more damage, because landing this is already hard enough, but actually doing damage is worse. And not to mention that you can get hit out of it so easily, because you're just a sitting duck. You sit there for so long. And Crucible Force isn't that well off either. Like, it does alright damage, but it's really inconsistent. It really depends on if you hit all the thorns or not, and sometimes it does good, and sometimes it doesn't do much at all. But even when you land a lot of them, it's still not that much damage. So honestly, once again, FromSoft, bump the damage on this one as well. Like, here's my two suggestions. Make Crucible Bloom faster, make you be able to recover from it, and make it do so much more damage, because right now it's terrible. Same with the Crucible Thorns, make it do more damage, and yeah, just that. They're both rather underwhelming. Just help them, please. And now, this is my personal opinion, but I think the Land of Shadow is another spell that it might need a little bit of damage. Of course, I am guessing it's gonna be rather painful in PvP and really good there, but I'm talking more PvE, and of course, this Gargoyle might be very holy resistant because he is a Black Blade, so keep that in mind. However, this spell isn't terrible, but I just think it needs a little boost of damage, like a 10% or something like that. It just needs a little more. That's about it. I just think this needs a little bump, because it is a remembrance spell, something you get out of a remembrance boss, which is, you know, not that easy to acquire, so having a little bit of more of a boost this would be rather nice. And another thing that would be nice is maybe a boost to the amount of healing the minor erdtree does, or more importantly, a bigger radius. This thing is just not worth it. This thing has a whopping 70 faith requirement, and it heals only this much in this tiny little radius? Like, this does not do near enough for 30 FP in such a high requirement, so FromSoft, make the spell actually worth using, because as of right now, I would never want to use the minor erdtree spell. It's just not worth. Jesus. And I wish this was the only incantations that would be somewhat underwhelming, but no, sadly not. I would say one of the most underwhelming spells in PvE is the Light of Mikola. The final spell you can get from the final boss, the hardest boss in the whole series, Console Radon, and you get this. You need a third remembrance if you take in the other two weapons, and this thing doesn't do enough, let me tell you. And, like, its damage is low, and I know it's supposed to be that slow, but if it's gonna be that slow and that hard to use and consume that much FP, make it do more damage. This is the final spell, this is the nuke. Make it feel like a nuke. So From Software, please make this do more damage. Okay, just make it do more damage. That's all I ask. More damage, please. And speaking of needing more damage, another spell I wish would be stronger is the Roar of Rugalia, the Bear Scream. Why is this thing so hard to... Like, why does it do so little damage? Why does it take so much effort to land the whole thing? Like, look, I know it's supposed to be a low requirement bear roar, and it's supposed to be cool and all, but, like, make it do more damage, man. Once again, I don't know, like, you can't tease me with such a cool spell within the trailer of the DLC and make it this weak. Make it stronger, please, FromSoft, okay? Make this either come out faster, like the whole full version, or make it do more damage. That's it. I love bears, and I love roaring like a bear, so make me feel like I'm roaring like a bear, please! And these next two spells are buff spells, and once again, they feel a little underwhelming. Like, this spell, which takes a while to get Dragon Bolt or Florisax, gives you like a 10% damage reduction? Like, should it do more? Maybe more stamina regen? Perhaps a little more defense than that? And then we even got Electrocharge, which just does like 8 damage per tick. Like, it has a little wave around you, does 8 damage. Like, couldn't you put anything else here? Why couldn't you have, like, make this a buff that, you know, speeds up maybe casting speed by like 20? Wouldn't that make sense, you know? Lightning is fast. It makes you cast faster. That could be a cool utility buff. No? Okay. And don't worry, we still have more spells that are insanely underwhelming, like the Rain of Fire, which is, in my opinion, an even worse version of Founding Rain of Stars. Like, come on, man. That spell does literally nothing. I think it's honestly bugged. So FromSoft, please don't tell me that's intentionally. It's supposed to do 80 damage on its full cast. Make it do more. Like, come on, it's a Rain of Fire. What are you talking about? And here we go, Roaring Butterflies, which you get from another Remembrance boss. It's slow, it builds up raw. I don't know how much, but I don't think, like, it might not build up raw on this boss exactly, but it took me a while to build up rot on another. But like this one is just really inconsistent, because sometimes it does really good damage, sometimes it doesn't. So yeah, and I think it's because of the placements of the butterflies. So From Software, if you hear me, make like perhaps make the placement of the butterflies a little better, so it's easier to cast. And then finally, for third, we got this spell, the Midra's Flame of Frenzy. Another Remembrance spell, and this one does good damage. It's fire damage, it's good. What's the issue then? It consumes so much FP, and it builds up so much madness. Like, the madness buildup is too much, and it consumes so much FP. Holy shit, like that's way too much, God. And thankfully this next spell isn't a Remembrance spell, thank God. But it's still bad, because God, that FP consumption to damage ratio is horrible. Look at that FP consumption. Look at it. That's way too high. And the damage isn't even that good. It's bad damage. Yet again, terrible damage. And oh boy, oh yeah, I forgot about Watchful Spirits. It shoots like 4 skulls that do no damage at all. Like, it would have been cool if it stayed there for about like 60 seconds. No, it shoots a total of 4 spirits. And that's it. You thought that was bad? Well, let me introduce you to Spira. It doesn't do much damage at all. It tracks terribly, and it puts you into place. And it takes 2 spell slots, by the way, so yeah, more underwhelming shit. And I'm pretty sure this spell is literally bugged. The Furious Blade of Ansbach, who once again you get by the end of the game after you beat the final boss, who is super hard. This thing doesn't build up bleed. Did I tell you that? It doesn't build up any bleed. And I think it's bugged. No, it's not because I'm using it on this gargoyle. No, I mean literally it does not build up any bleed on any enemy as of right now. I think it's a bug and people pointed out. So please, I really hope it's a bug, because this looks so cool. And maybe up the damage a little bit. Like, that's it. I think it's a bug, and I really hope it is, because you should not have to kill a final boss to get a spell this cool, and it doesn't do any bleed despite saying Fierce Blade of Ansbach. A blood knight. Are you kidding me? Like, man, all these spells make me go. Well, to conclude this video, which is mostly about PvE, oh no, it's all about PvE and the things I wish were changed for the PvE, I still want to preface and remind everyone that this DLC from Software is truly amazing, and From Software should feel proud of themselves, because they have put so much effort into this, and they made something beautiful, truly. Now, do I still feel like these changes need to be made? Definitely, yes, they do, and some of these weapon changes do need to be made, and especially the first couple of changes with the Scadutree fragments, but otherwise I must say I am grateful for this DLC. This DLC was a ton of fun to play through, and while the last section was incredibly hair-pulling and difficult, it was still worth and fun doing. And also I am grateful for From Software doing this. I still would advocate for these changes, and I do hope really that these changes do come to fruition, and some of these aspects which are, in my opinion, somewhat forgotten by FromSoft could be improved upon. However, I don't make this video because I just want to criticize FromSoft. I do it because I love this game, and I really, really do. And Elden Ring has been my favorite game for the longest time, as I know, and it truly is. And I hope you guys got something to think about and were entertained by my screaming and yapping. Well, aside from all this, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon. And by the way, good luck in dealing with On. I believe in you. See ya!